Hello, podcast lovers. This is your host, JJ. Boy, we get to start this episode off talking about uncles, the best uncles on the planet, which may include Tucker Lucas. Then we're going to take a weird deep dive into Perfect Strangers, and then we get to AI. By the way, this episode, no AI was used whatsoever to create. You can take that from me, even though you can't verify that this voice is not being generated. Enjoy JJ World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Two different coffees in the same cup. By the way, did you notice that my cup is sending a message?
It says, totally the best uncle ever.
Yeah. I am letting other uncles know you guys are on fucking notice.
May I comment, though, that it's a poor choice in how they have chosen like the coloring of the fonts.
Yeah, so
because totally and uncle are in this kind of metallic dark against a dark blue, so it looks like it just says the best ever.
Which, you know, is also a pertinent message. Listen,
right.
Guys, I'm the best ever.
Like, they approach you, they see that cup from afar, and they go, hey, that dude's the best ever. And then they get closer and like, oh, goddamn, he's the best uncle ever.
Yeah.
I don't understand the use of the word totally, though. That seems superfluous, doesn't it?
It is redundant, isn't it? Totally and the best. But my nephew picked it out, and he's 4. So I think we're going to go with it. But
okay.
Did growing up, do you have a favorite uncle who was the best uncle?
I had an uncle who actually wasn't my uncle. He was a fraternity brother of my dad's, and we called him Uncle Wes. Mm-hmm. And he was one of those guys who, lifelong bachelor, never had a family, taught me about being just a great guy, was an uncle to so many different families that he would take the kid. He would do things like this. Like he'd be like, JD, I'm going to take your kids to Chuck E. Cheese. And he'd go to Chuck E. Cheese with us, which is, I think, the worst place a parent can imagine going, and sit with us for 2 hours while we eat crap pizza and play games. And he would drink coffee. He was the type of guy who drank coffee until like 7 o'clock at night.
Oof. How did he sleep?
I think he slept in a chair wearing a CPAP machine by the end is what my guess is. But Uncle Wes was the guy in our family who was the best uncle. Like, and he gave himself over to kids for no reason. There's no reason. Like, he would come to Fargo when he didn't live here. He'd come to Fargo and get a hotel room and make sure to get 2 double beds so that my sister, myself, and then like Lindsay Schumacher and her brothers and sisters, we could all pile onto the other double bed and like stay the night at a hotel. Now, Wes also snored like there was no in fact, I won't go too far, but here's a couple things you should know about Uncle Wes.
I met him once.
Yeah, you did. We stayed at his place. Yep. Remember that?
I slept on the couch. It was a very nice place.
Very nice place, right? All decorated, I'm sure, by his like Pier 1 imports. Like he walked in and he said, like, I'll give you $150 to just decorate my place, Pier 1 clerk. So Wes was a workaholic, without a doubt. Like, that dude worked non-stop. And what he did originally was he worked for a company that insured car lots. So car companies, when they're selling you cars, have huge amounts of inventory, right? And they're all outside. What happens when a hailstorm comes through and ruins 2/3 of your inventory, right? So he did this. And then also, let's say someone comes and buys a car from you and then doesn't pay for it anymore.
Sure.
Right. Sure. So he was doing the underwriting for that, which led to a job for him to work for a guy named Wes Rydell, owner of Rydell Motors up in Grand Forks.
Couple of Wes's
just a couple of Wes's hanging out. And he became the guy
who was a real Wes man.
I wish when I spoke at his funeral, I wish that had already come up because that would have been a killer line. That's a perfect funeral line right there. He also drove an Escalade that my brother-in-law called the Wescalade. So
That's awesome.
every time you saw Wes, he was driving a different car because he'd constantly be like, "Oh, I'm driving this to Bismarck because a car lot needed a yellow this and blah blah blah." Anyway. So because he was a workaholic, in the days before cell phones, I remember Wes would check his messages using a hotel phone, but he'd use his credit card. Like you essentially would call your service directly, and so that the hotel wouldn't charge you the $1.50 a minute, you're making a call through your credit card to get there. And so he had his credit card number memorized. And I remember thinking that was the most adult thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. Yeah. And so he not only was a workaholic, and he did great things. He became the guy that they sent to fix car lots. So this place is underperforming. It's 30% down from its goal. They'd send Wes Hansen in, and after 6 months, it would be better.
So it's like Winston Wolfe in Pulp Fiction.
It is.
Like,
yeah.
It'll take me 30 minutes to get there. I'll be there in 10.
Yep. So it was just great. But I remember some times with Wes that were just amazing. Like I remember telling him the year that Home Alone came out on video, right? So Home Alone probably came out in video like in March or April after it had come out like in November, the holiday season. And I remember telling Wes how much I loved this movie and it was so good. And I love it. I love it. I love it. And so he went out and bought a VCR. He didn't own one. He bought a VCR so that we could watch Home Alone, and he got it to his house and he got so frustrated hooking it up. And he goes, "Okay, so where's the tape?" And I said, "I don't have the tape." And so then we had to go back out and we bought the tape, and he said, "Well, so now I've got this, I might as well buy it." And so he bought like 20 tapes, and all on my recommendation. And I was 9 years old at the time. And so we came home with Weird Science, RoboCop.
Solid.
Yeah. Blade Runner.
Nice.
Right? I mean, like, it was amazing. And I remember spending a weekend at Wes's condo, and I don't know why I was at his condo, but maybe it was just like, I'll take the kids for the weekend.
Sure.
Watching all of these movies and like watching RoboCop, and Wes is there and he goes, "I don't think this is appropriate for you." And I'm like, "I've seen it." And he goes, "Okay." So that was the best uncle in my life, was Wes Hansen, who, oh, God rest his soul. You know, he in fact, we were just at the 3-year mark. I got a call on the 3rd of July telling me that Wes had passed in 2020. And it was his brother, whose first name I do not know because I have called him Wildcat for 39 years. That's how if I had to find him in a directory, I'd be like, Wildcat Hansen? I don't know, maybe. And that was the only funeral I attended during the height of COVID too. And that also is an awkward thing, right? Is how many people can make it? People can't fly in for it. They also had his funeral was in Carrington, North Dakota, which felt awkward and weird, but they told some great stories. My dad's best friend, Jim Gunkelman, who they called Gunk. What a great nickname, right? Gunk told a story about how, I got one more Wes story after.
Yeah.
This. So Gunk told a story about how Wes borrowed, he had a little VW Bug, and Wes borrowed the Bug because he was going to go pick up this girl he was bringing to a dance who lived like 2 towns over from Grand Forks because they all went to UND. They were all part of the same fraternity. And he said, the next day I went out there and there was the Bug, but there was no bumper on the front. And so he said, "Well, Wes, what happened to the bumper?" And he goes, "I've got no idea." And so he said, "Well, we need to find where the bumper is." And so they got in the car and they were driving, I guess, and they eventually found the bumper on the side of the road, like near a bridge. And it's like, well, what happened? The only time will tell. But one of my dad's favorite stories. So Wes had this big raccoon coat, which is like the type of coat that they wore like in the 1920s.
Like he was a fur trapper?
Bingo, right? Like full length, like down. And so there's a story of Wes at this big party they were having at their fraternity, and they thought they were going to run out of beer, so Wes was going to go make a beer run, and he goes, and a horrible blizzard's taking place, and so he puts on his raccoon coat and he leaves, and he never comes back. And the next morning, as everyone was like, saying goodbye to their dates and the people who'd spent the night, they said all of a sudden a snowbank started to rumble. And there, coming out of the snowbank, was Wes, who had pretty much tauntauned himself inside of this coat. Like, must have got like 20 steps and been like, nope, sleepy time. Wes Hansen, just one of the absolute greatest, taught me in the same way that like your dad has influenced me as far as like what being a man is supposed to be, right? Away from that toxic side of those things and like honoring commitments. Wes Hansen taught me about generosity of time, generosity of talent, generosity of treasure, and how important those three things are. And if they're not in tandem, because a lot of people gave a lot of grace to Wes over the years, because Wes was a big guy, like large life. He's like a real life John Candy. Yeah. In fact, my mom took our copy of Uncle Buck on VHS and crossed out the Buck and put Wes above it because he was like Uncle Buck. And just, he's a great guy. He was so much fun. We loved Uncle Wes.
Yeah, the one time I met him was, you and I were going somewhere. I can't remember where. And so I don't know where he was at that time. Was it Bismarck or something?
No, he was. We stopped in this. He lived in Blaine, Minnesota, north of the cities, because we were on our. We made what I would consider a rookie mistake on my part, which is like, Tucker, let's get to the cities and we'll spend the night, and then we'll do the rest of the drive to Kentucky the next day.
Okay, that's what.
And really, the first day should be the day you try and get as far as you possibly can.
Yep. Get that under your belt.
But we got there and we stayed with Uncle Wes. Yeah, that first night.
So that one instance I had with him, he was a great guy. He paid for dinner, took us out to eat. And he was very, very, very welcoming. I liked him a lot.
He took us to a place called Axel's Bonfire. I'll never forget the name of that restaurant. And it was good, and I ordered the mac and cheese because I was vegetarian at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And then after 4 bites, I'm like, I'm tasting something I'm not used to, and there's bacon in it. And in the middle of the night, my stomach was so upset because if you're a vegetarian and you suddenly go to eating meat, your enzymes can't really take care of it.
I'm so glad that phase ended for you.
Me too. And it all came from someone telling me I couldn't do it. And I'm like, oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, here goes. Let's talk about you being an uncle, though, because you just came back from a whirlwind trip to visit a new member of your family.
Yeah, so my little sister had a baby very beginning of June, a baby girl. Her name's Tegan. She's beautiful. And I know everyone says that about the baby in their family, of course. And I'm saying that about the one in my family right now, but just fell in love with this child over and over and over again. Took a million photos and videos. And then spent a ton of time with my nephew Dane, who's 4 now, and he's 4 and he looks like he's 6. Like, he's grown so much.
No, he looks like he's a 75-year-old British man is what he looks like.
Right.
He looks like he belongs in the cast of Little Britain.
Right. But and so his personality is really, coming online now and really figuring out who this guy is. And so every single time if he would go, Uncle Tucker, will you play with me? I'd go, yes. And I'd put my cell phone down and we'd go play in his room, play outside, whatever. And I'd play for 2-3 hours, being totally present with him. And it was awesome. I had a great time. And my sister gave me a really sweet compliment where she said, no one really plays with him the way you do. Like as a compliment, you're able to kind of keep it going. And I just said, yeah, well, I had to tell her this. Because one thing with kids, especially at that age, if you don't know what to say or what to do next, because it's not like an adult that you can just have a conversation with, ask them a question that they know the answer to. Even if it's like, what shape is that? I keep thinking it's a circle, but I don't think it's a circle. And they'll be like, oh, it's a triangle, right? They love that moment where they can teach you something and show that they know a thing, and then just let that, and then it just kind of branches off from there and you go in whatever direction.
So
However,
at like daycare, they're all sitting together, be like, "Is your uncle stupid?" Yeah, my uncle and aunt are really. They are always talking about like, "Is that a rectangle?" And be like, "No, bitch."
yeah, with him,
That's a trapezoid.
with him, it's usually vehicles because he's really learning the different types of vehicles. He's obsessed with those. But
You told me a story about how he like the problem with like a flatbed semi truck.
Yeah.
Like, that is peak personality that I love in a child.
He wants to walk up to any vehicle and kind of inspect it, and then he'll let you know, like, that one's red. It's a red truck. Oh, that's a flatbed. It carries cars, and he's got all these things. That's an excavator. That's what that is. But I would ask him these obvious questions, and Brianna, my sister, who I love to death, would answer them as though I was actually asking the question. And I'd finally have to go, Brianna, I know that Steve and Maggie is called that because that's a magpie. I'm asking him to tell me because I'm interacting with him. So like, I'd be like, hey, we're watching Steve and Maggie, one of the shows he loves. And I'd be like, what kind of bird is Maggie? Is Maggie like a chicken? And before Dane could say anything, Brianna would go, oh no, she's a magpie. And from the kitchen, I'm like, oh, thanks, Brie. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
So really, you could start communicating with your sister in the same way.
I think
like
I
you
can
sit down
now.
at the Thanksgiving table, like, what kind of a meat is this? It's a turkey, Tucker. Thanks, Brianna.
Thanks, Brianna. That her and Dad have the same thing where they're like, oh, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I know the answer to this. It's like, I know you do. I know you do.
I don't want you to be frustrated with seeking out the correct answer to this, so I'll give it to you right off the bat.
Right. But so I went down to Arkansas, so drove 2 days down, stayed there for 3 days, drove 2 days back. It was happy. I love doing it, love seeing them, but I'm happy to be home too, just because I'm so much of a homebody and I like my normalcy and all that kind of stuff. But it was good to go down there. But speaking of uncles, so for me, I always divide favorite uncle between the two families because on my mom's side, I have 5 uncles, right? And I think they'll all forgive me for this, but my favorite's Uncle Baseball.
Paul. Yeah,
Uncle Paul, who's on the show once before.
Who I believe just got honored.
He did. I don't remember exactly the honorific he was given, but he does a lot of community work where he's living and stuff. And I love me Uncle Baseball. He was the youngest of all the uncles, and so he was the closest in age to me and my cousins. And so he was the one who'd always be the one making the fart jokes and stuff. And on my dad's side, I only have one uncle. So by de facto, he becomes my favorite uncle. But I think if I had more uncles on my dad's side, Uncle Tim would still be my favorite uncle. You've met Uncle Tim a few times. He and my Aunt Jane, it's almost like a comedy duo where he'll make the joke and then she'll go, oh, Tim, be the one who gets kind of flustered by it. He was the one who has always, he's one of the funniest people I know.
But he's not a comedian, right?
He's not trying. Yeah,
that's the beauty of it is he is the guy who's so funny, but he's not trying to be funny, right? Mm-hmm. He's funny because naturally he commands a room.
Yeah.
And that grows in you.
But the thing is, he's not even necessarily commanding a room. He's like a sniper waiting in the bushes. Like you don't see it coming and then it happens. Mama Luke had a lot of that, but she would also kind of command a room. She was a bigger than life. I'll kind of talk about her first because he got her humor. Right. My dad and my Aunt Nisi, they're both very funny people, but in their own way. And it's very different. Uncle Tim and Mama Luke had a lot of similarities and like you wouldn't see it coming. And then it would hit you and you would just fucking die from laughing. So Mama Luke would always start a story with, now let me tell you. And I was visiting her one time. It was just me and her. So I stayed with her for a week. This would have been, what was the summer that episode 1 came out? Was that 99?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, so it was because we went and watched episode 1 and then got Taco Bell after that.
Yep.
But anyways, we're eating breakfast in her kitchen and watching the cardinals outside eat the birdseed. And there's just a lull. And she goes, Tucker, do you know why I like living here on this farm all by myself? And I'm like, well, why, Mama Luke? And she goes, well, now let me tell you. If I wanted to, I could put a sign up out there said fuck, fuckity, fuck, and no one could tell me not to. right? She'd say that kind of stuff. You wouldn't see it coming. One time she got into the car with my dad, my sister, and I, and as she gets buckled in, she goes, shoot, it's tighter than a Roman orgy in here. And my dad goes, Mom, right? It scandalized him, of all people. Uncle Tim's a lot like that, is that he just has these quips that are, in their own way inappropriate, obviously, but knows how to kind of deliver them in a way that you just love him for it. I was 5 years old once, and we were visiting my Aunt Jane's parents, his wife's parents, and we're leaving the house, and I remember this distinctly. I noticed that the cars who are parked on the street are parking in the wrong direction than what I'm used to, right? So they're on the left side of the road, parking, looking left. And as a 5-year-old, I notice it, and I go, Uncle Tim, why are the cars parked like that? And he goes, Tucker, they're dumber than cat shit. And Aunt Jane goes, Tim. So I'm talking to him this morning on the phone. He gives me a call every couple months just to check in. And my dad's on his way into town. So he's like, are you ready for the Tasmanian devil to get into town? I'm like, yeah, I am. So we're chatting. And I tell him, like, hey, I got a new job. I ended my last job in May, and I've got this new one now. I just got hired. And he's like, well, shoot, I've worked at so many places in my life. I think only Benjamin Franklin has worked in more places than I have. And I go, yeah.
Which is a weird colloquialism.
Right.
That, like, okay. Right. I've never heard that saying. But
well,
okay.
It turns out it was a setup. I didn't realize I was getting set up for the gut punch. And I'm like, yeah, well, that man, he sure was a rolling stone, wasn't he? He was all over America and Europe. And I start to sip my coffee. And he goes, well, shoot, that man fuck a snake if someone held its head. I fucking spit my coffee all over my computer, and my cats ran out of the room because I was choking on what I was laughing with. So, Uncle Tim, oh God, I love Uncle Tim. I love Aunt Jane. Hanging out with the two of them, they're just some of my favorite people. And so I hope I get a chance to go visit them sometime this year with the new job, which I just got hired yesterday. So I'm going to be the senior video editor at In-House Advertising in Fargo.
The senior video
editor. Pound my chest on that one. I don't know exactly.
Get some business cards. I know you're not a guy who normally gets business cards. That is worthy of a business card.
Every time I've gotten business cards, I give out absolutely zero. I'm basically paying for a bunch of cards that are going to go in the garbage. Either I'm putting them in the garbage, or if I were to give it to someone, it's probably going in the garbage.
For a while, I did the marketing for Fargo Billiards and Gastropub, and they're like, we're going to order you business cards. And I was like, okay. So they ordered business cards, and they ordered 10,000 business cards.
You're going to meet 10,000 people to hand these out to, right?
And so I was like, why did you get 10,000? They're like, well, to be honest, we were going to just order 1,000, but then we got 10,000 instead. So they're like, so just give these out. And I'm like, well, you keep 9 of these boxes. You keep 9,000, and I'll take 1,000 with me, because the odds of me unless we start like taping coupons to these things, I don't see a reason why people are going to need that. And
I'm going to go Valley Fair and put one on every windshield.
Right. Just recently I threw out I kept like maybe a dozen or so, but like I threw out the rest of them because I said, well, I don't have this job anymore. And they put my real name on the business card. Like they didn't put JJ. Yeah.
Oh, well,
and
that's
like,
silly.
Right. And I'm like,
JJ you should always go with that, because that's easy to remember, and it's your brand, quote unquote.
If you got a business card with my real name on it, it might take you a minute to go like, who the hell is this?
Right. I'm not going to put William Lucas on a business card, which is my real name.
Right.
I'm going to put Tucker, because that stands out. Not many Tuckers. Every Tucker I've ever met was a golden retriever, and I'm not even joking. So I like having that name to lead with.
Yeah.
Right. No, that makes sense. It's
unique. I was talking to, in fact, one of our patrons over this last week at a picnic, and we were talking about funny funeral stories, like funeral situations where you just go like, oh boy. And my grandma had an interesting funeral story where when my grandma Alice died, she died on Christmas, right? So of course I was working at Take Two Video, and my mom picked me up from Take Two Video and went to the hospital because she had had a heart attack the week before and had chosen to take the breathing tubes out. And we arrived maybe 2 minutes after she had flatlined.
Okay.
And her neighbor, who was this awesome woman, the townhouse like had it over, was a nurse at Sanford and happened to be there. And so she wasn't alone. She had someone who cared for her. But at noon, everyone was coming to our house for Christmas Day. And so you don't cancel Christmas, but it's got this somber, sad. Everyone walks in and you could tell they've already been crying. And then it just, everyone's like, I can't believe it. And I'm
But at least you're all together though. Right.
But then we started talking about but she really would have loved this because now she's the only topic of conversation at Christmas. We're not going to talk about the weather. We're not going to talk about vacations anyone's taken. It's let's talk about Grandma Alice. So on the 26th, we have to start making funeral arrangements, and we get word from the head pastor at the church my grandmother attended that she was so proud. She was they do a yearbook type thing every couple of years and list the members with a picture. My grandma was so proud of having her picture in this, register and everything. And she said, I am in Disney World with my family. We had planned a family trip right after the holidays. I won't be able to be there, but we're going to have this young woman who's kind of training in to take care of it. So young woman is just so nervous, didn't have any idea what she was really doing. And the day of my grandmother's funeral, there was a bomb scare at the federal building, which is right next to our church. So they have to evacuate the church. So Hanson Runsvold is briskly walking the body out of the church.
Can't that just stay?
Right? And so they go, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to leave one of our people. And this is the end of December. It's snowing. We'll leave one of our people here to tell people we've moved this now to the Hanson Runsvold funeral home.
Got it.
So we're okay. And we'll delay the service by half an hour. That should give anyone ample time if they were here. I mean, we're talking a 2-minute drive. So we go down there and this woman comes up to, I think, my mom, and she's panicked because she goes, my notes. I left all my notes in the pulpit. All my notes. And my mom was like, don't worry about it. Make it 20 minutes long. We'll sing a song. We're good to go.
Yeah.
And so she gets up there and I can tell you can tell a bad improviser, even if you've never been an improviser yourself. But this woman started talking she goes, just think about it. The smell of cinnamon and fresh baked cookies and balsam fir. And these will be the things that we associate with Shirley. And everyone starts looking around. They're like, who the hell is Shirley? Well, my grandmother's given name is Shirley Alice Stenjum.
Oh.
Nobody, in fact, I didn't even know until the week that she had died that her first name was Shirley, because she has been Alice the whole time. And then I find out the reasoning behind it. My Aunt Jonelle's telling everyone well, my parents wanted to. No, she's talking. My grandparents wanted to name her Alice Shirley Stenjum. But then they thought her initials will be Ass.
Oh, yep.
So they named her Shirley Alice Stenjum. We'll just go by Alice the whole time. And this poor woman, just nothing was going right for her. And so at one point, I saw my mom give her the wrap it up sign. And I was like, that is probably one of the most gracious things you can do to somebody, to be like, listen.
Instead of the shepherd's crook coming in and pulling them off stage.
Yeah. Or in radio, we do a thing where you take two closed fists together and then you pull them apart to say, this is a break. You're breaking a stick in half.
Or some pasta, maybe.
Or some pasta. Do you break your spaghetti noodles in half?
I used to, and then I saw a video where an Italian guy got really upset, and so I stopped doing it. And I realized
the length has a purpose to it.
Yeah, but also you know what? That's true. It's gonna all fall in there eventually, anyways. Just let it happen.
Now, that being said, you're supposed to have a pot of water that's big enough where it's mostly covered, because you can actually steam the top of your. Let's say you put it in a pot where half of the noodle is sticking out while the other half is in. You can actually steam the top of those noodles and not make they'll be too al dente.
Usually what I do then is I just kind of help it move down in.
Me too. Yeah. It gets pretty flexible
Doesn't take
quick.
long.
You feel like you're if you were drowning someone, this is how you do it. Little bit.
Or, you could use penne like an adult, which is what I do, because I love penne.
Do you know, this is totally unrelated to anything we've talked about, but in the movie Dick Tracy, familiar with that movie?
Yes, I love that movie. That's one of the movies that I collect multiple copies on VHS.
Okay.
Because I love the package art, and it gives me an old memory, but keep going.
At the very beginning, they give Lips Manley the bath, and that I think would be the worst way to die. And the bath is they put you in this crate that has a lockable top, and they go, your lips, you smell. You need the bath. Not the bath. Not the bath, big boy. Not the bath. And they cover you with cement, and then they drop that into the harbor. They lock the top and drop you into the harbor. So not only do you drown, but your body is now encased in cement sitting down there inside of a box.
Yeah. No,
that sounds horrible. Thank you to the bath.
What a great story.
Right? I remember going to see Dick Tracy and watching that and being horrified of like, people do that to other people.
I don't know why this is reminding me of it, but that's playing the scene in my head from Leonard Part 6. When the frogs kill the guy in the car. Have you seen that movie? Yeah, where all the frogs get underneath the car and then all jump in unison.
Yep.
Throw the car into the lake.
The bizarre deaths that you see in movies that are so over the top. Like, it's one thing to watch an action movie and to see someone, like get pushed off the side of a building, like a la Alan Rickman or something like that. But it's another when the death is so weirdly comical. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like the Batman deaths of like people who use Joker products and then they laugh and then they're stuck with the big smiley face. That is way more horrific to me than seeing somebody who is like caught in a burning building.
If you go back and watch that first 89 Batman with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, you go, this is amazing. And they would never make the superhero movie like this again. Because it's actually terrifying in some ways. And same with Batman Returns, which was why they made that big change for Schumacher, because they thought that Penguin was too scary. And I thought, no, he's just the right amount of scary. And that was when they could just be gross and scary. And now when they have to try to, it doesn't work at the same level. I thought The Batman was a fine movie, but I mean, Riddler and Joker just weren't that scary. I was like, they're evil. I get it.
Now, Colin Farrell's Penguin was fun to watch.
Awesome, but I'm looking forward to watching the miniseries.
Do you think there's a multiverse where the Danny DeVito Penguin sees the Colin Farrell Penguin and they're both like, what the hell is this gross thing in front of me? Did you ever play the Batman Arkham games?
Oh, yeah. So I've played through Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. Arkham City is one of my all-time favorite games. And I want to play, because then there's the prequel Arkham Origins and then Arkham Knight. So I still have to play those two, but Arkham City is just it's one of the top 5 video games I've ever played. Fantastic. And obviously it has inspired like the Spider-Man games since then and other games like that.
It gives you the feel of what it would like to be Batman.
It's an amazing Batman simulator, but also it tells you an awesome Batman story. Like a great
it's
20-hour
Christmas,
movie.
right? On that, because it's snowing I think it's Christmas.
I wouldn't be surprised if Christmas is going on, but Christmas isn't a big theme.
That's the thing, is like it doesn't influence the storyline in any way, but like they're little. I think like at one point if you walk by one of like the TV stores, you can hear like jingle bells playing like light in the background. But which to me is a great. It's why Batman Returns I think is fun, because it is a Christmas movie technically.
Yeah, and you know what? Batman and Christmas go together like peanut butter and jelly. They really do. I've always wanted to know.
You got your Christmas in my Batman. You got my Batman in my Christmas.
I've always wanted to know where the Jingle Bells, Batman Smells, Robin Laid an Egg, where that variation like originated from. Was that from the 60s TV show?
It must be. That sounds like something that they would have written for like Cesar Romero, like doing the Joker.
It's one of the first parody songs you learn as a kid. It was one of the first ones I learned as a kid. And we would sing it all the time and think it was just as funny every single time we sang it.
How far do you go in it? Jingle bells, Batman smells, Robin laid an egg. Batmobile lost a wheel and Joker got away.
And there I think there's other endings too, but that's the one I remember. That's sort of the primary one. And I think there's, naughtier versions of it that
there certainly has
come out as well.
Yeah. That is the first parody song anyone ever really learned as a kid.
I think so. That or Diarrhea.
I think that's further. I think that the song, like by the way, if
you're sitting in a yurt and you got to take a squirt, diarrhea. Although I wouldn't say yurt. I can't remember what it was that we would sing.
The one I know is baseball themed. If you're sliding into first and you feel something burst, diarrhea. If you're sliding into second, what is it like? If you're sliding into second.
I always loved how Beavis and Butthead will call Daria diarrhea.
Yeah, it's perfect. Do you ever think of how weird it is, like how some shows, like Daria is a spin-off of Beavis and Butthead, which makes sense, right? Because the character's introduced in that show and it makes sense.
It was a great show.
But then in the show Perfect Strangers, which is about cousin Larry Appleton and Balky Bartakamus, the woman who runs the elevator at their apartment is Lois
At the office.
But don't they live above the store they work in?
Oh, do they? I thought they worked at a newspaper.
Because Larry does work at.
I think they work at a newspaper,
Chicago Tribune.
Yeah, and she operates the elevator in that.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. My Perfect Strangers knowledge is wonky at best.
I loved Perfect Strangers as a kid. I was obsessed with the one where they're trying to learn karate, and Balky dresses as a ninja and is like posing in there, and they have like a little karate fight where cousin Larry wins.
I vividly remember 2 episodes of Perfect Strangers. One is they win a shopping spree at a grocery store. So they've got like 4 minutes to load their cart with whatever they want. And Balky has asked all the people like in their building what they would like. And so he's trying to grab stuff, but Larry's trying to grab the big ticket item so he can resell like a giant piece of fish to a restaurant and make money off of it. And Balky tosses something to it and Larry tosses it back, and then they end up tossing these things and wasting all this time. And then the other episode that I vividly remember is cousin Larry gets hit in the head and gets amnesia, but he's got a big interview for the newspaper, and Balky is helping him through it. And so when he goes up, he goes, "My name is cousin Larry Applemoose," and he takes on the essentially the characterization of Balky and makes the interview. It turns out it's a big success, right? Because this person trusts him for being so open and honest.
I think of the one where Balky gets checks for the first time and he thinks that's as good as money. And so he starts just writing checks for things. And I just remember the time he goes, "Oh, don't worry, I have checks," and then it cuts to commercial break because the audience goes like, "Ooh," like they can see what's coming. But no, I forget what's her name again. The character's name who's running the elevator.
It's Lois. What's the last name of the family? Winslow.
Because her husband does make an appearance in Perfect Strangers,
right? As a cop, and he's a cop. Yeah.
So then they spin off.
Family Matters. So when you say Family Matters is a spin off of Perfect Strangers, you go, how?
The Winslows, but then Frasier is a spin-off of Cheers.
But he's a main character. He's in that show all the time. Lois
it's still a
Winslow,
spin-off though,
right? But Lois is barely she's not a main character in that show. It would be like if you're saying, "Listen, you know what? We should spin off from the Batman. Be a really good character to give their own comic book." The guy who made the gun that Joker used to kill his family.
Well, it wasn't the intention that she would be, but then Urkelmania happened.
Yeah, and Steve Urkel becomes the star of that show, without a doubt.
Right.
In fact, if you've never seen the Key and Peele sketch about Urkel's
good.
stranglehold on that show,
so good. Well, and Jordan Peele's performance as the guy who is the actor who plays Carl Winslow.
D. Ray Devon,
who is in Die Hard, by the way, which you referenced with the Alan Rickman.
It's all coming around. It's all coming around.
There's a shared universe of those sitcoms because Urkel appeared on Full House at one point, so those universes are connected. I don't know if Step by Step ever had a crossover or not.
Technically is because of all the shows were at Disney World at the same time. So the thing that we are not getting with modern sitcoms that I miss were the massive crossover nights, and it usually happened because they all went to any ABC show went
World.
to Disney World, and so they had these awesome Disney World shows.
Yeah, and I mean, that was what the TGIF Friday night lineup. Which always confused me as a kid because I would see the restaurant in TGIF and then I would see this one and I was like, is that the same?
Yeah.
Is that?
Are we going to go in and get a step-by-step burger?
Are they there? Are the characters there?
Good question.
How great would that be if all those characters also were in a restaurant that you could just go visit all the time? At some point using AI, that's going to be possible.
Oh God, I would love that.
By the way, People really need to start taking AI seriously because I just listened to an AI generated cover of Barbie Girl by Johnny Cash, and it sounds exactly like Johnny Cash recorded his own cover of Barbie Girl. You cannot tell, with the exception of knowing it's the Barbie Girl lyrics, and there's no way he covered that song. And it starts with, "Hi, I am not Johnny Cash."
Oh, really?
And then he sings Barbie Girl with I forget, they're doing it to the beat of it's not Ring of Fire, I don't think. It's one of his songs. Might be Folsom Prison Blues. I can't remember.
Walk the Line, maybe?
Maybe, but it sounds exactly like Johnny Cash. You can't even hear any modulation or anything. It even sounds like the AI accounted for trying to make it sound like a human is actually doing this. It's so crazy.
I think that AI is terrifying for my industry because take a listener of JJ Meets World, right?
Yep.
You probably, listener, don't have thousands of hours of your recorded voice available for anyone at a given moment.
Right.
But I do. That's the nature of radio, right? So one day I signed up for a free AI program, and I took 10 minutes of Joel's show and 10 minutes of It Takes Two with Amy and JJ. And I made an AI voice for Joel and an AI voice for Amy. And while it wasn't perfect, I said, I did this in less than a minute.
Right.
And I told it what to say.
This is a technology that is improving itself.
Right.
And the thing is, it used to be, okay, what it's going to do is it's going to remix all the recordings. So if you said, I saw the dog walk over there, it's going to okay, there's the sample for the word dog. I'm going to place that same sample of dog whenever I want this character to say dog. But now the way it works is that all it needs is a few seconds of hearing your voice and your dynamic range of your voice. Oh, that's what they sound like. Well, now I can make them say anything, right? It doesn't need 1,000. It actually doesn't even need 1,000 minutes of your voice.
Right.
It needs 30 seconds of your voice to go, oh, that's what you sound like. Okay, I've now mapped the sound of their voice, and now I can make that voice say anything. It's not like the old spy movies where they'd have to get someone to say something into a recorder.
Right.
So
my voice is my passport.
Right. So they could recreate their voice password into some other thing. Now it just needs to hear you for a couple of seconds. So, and that's, especially when it's audio only, therefore you can't see the person. Right. That's a game changer right there. They can already do it with, so AI can create a still photo of a person. There's a website called This Person Does Not Exist. It's been around for a few years. And it used to be that you could kind of tell by the teeth who wasn't getting it right. But now it can just create people that don't exist. And then it can also animate a still photo of a person, a head and shoulders, to make it look like they're talking. So ideally, all they would need to do is generate a person who doesn't exist, and then take something that maybe sounds like JJ, or, I'm just going to use your voice as an example, but I'm going to change this one little pitch tone here, and then be like, I now have a completely artificial person who I can have as a talking head.
Yep.
That I can write to have them say anything you want. Well, where do you see talking heads? Oh, I don't know, 24-hour news networks all day, every day. Mm-hmm. So the amount of just disinformation, we're already awash in it even before AI. It's going to be crazy.
There's an opportunity here for duping people and saying listen, this is Tucker Carlson, but spelling it Carlsen, right? Making it look like a misspelling. But if you've never seen Tucker Carlson's name spelled out, you don't know that that's wrong. And then having them say me and I without saying I am Tucker Carlson. And all of a sudden now you think, oh, he's endorsing Applebee's.
Right.
He's like, well, my favorite place to go eat after the news is to go to Applebee's and have a delicious, 2 for $25. I get the mozzarella sticks.
That was something with Jet Li. He was working on the Matrix sequels back then, and he had been working for 9 months in the choreography with them and all this. He was going to be playing the character who, I forget the actor who eventually played him. And so they wanted to digitize all of his movements and his face and his look so they could recreate him however they wanted to. And that was what made him go, you know what? No, I worked hard for those. And you don't just get to use me up all the time, but they're already doing that with a lot of actors where they're getting the perpetual rights to that actor's likeness.
Right.
So they're digitizing their voice and getting a million photos of them so that we'll have young Indiana Jones movies in the future when Harrison Ford has been dead for decades. Right.
We thought for a while, like, oh, someone will do the performance and we'll put mocap all over them. You don't even need that now.
Nope. The computer will go, I have more than enough data to be able to create this.
This SAG and AFTRA joining or starting their strike. I think a lot of people are confused that they're joining the Writers Guild and like strike, and these are just two independent strikes that are taking place at the same time. Also, do you know the last time that SAG and WGA went on strike at the same time? Do you know who the president of SAG was?
No.
Ronald Reagan. Do you know who the president is now?
It's Fran Drescher. Yeah.
Is she going to be the president of the United States? Is this some kind of weird, like, journey it's taking on?
UPS is about to strike too. The Teamsters, they approved it 97% vote, and I can understand why. Because UPS made billions of dollars during the pandemic and didn't pass any of that on to their drivers. I learned that their vehicles don't have air conditioning in them.
Yeah.
And they're going to slowly start to get it anyways. Yeah.
It's, to me, and I had a disagreement. I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast, but I had a disagreement with a coworker who wrote a blog being like, I don't care what it doesn't matter to me about the WGA strike. And I said, it should matter to you, because while you think this is about millionaires making more millions, it's about people who are getting paid less than you are to be in writers' rooms, writing a sitcom that wins an Emmy and then getting no money from the syndication afterwards.
Right.
It is, and like, for the same point, I agree with the SAG strike right now, because they're in a very tenuous spot for what they're going to be going forward. And could you imagine being an attorney who works on contracts and having to comb through that contracts to say, like, listen, the performance that you are contracting from this person is only valid in the original cut of this film and not for additional films, blah, 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 all these type of things.
Every time there's a new platform, the C-suite loves it because, well, contractually, we don't have to pay you royalties for that thing, right? So the C-suite always makes out like bandits, and the people who generated the art in the first place get screwed over. And so it's like, yeah, if I have $500,000 in the bank, sure, I'm doing great. But if I could have had $5 million and someone who didn't write a single line of dialogue that I wrote just took it because they could, well, yeah, of course, I want a cut. I want my cut of that.
And I will keep going back to this, which is, as powerful a tool as AI is, in my opinion, it's not creating things that are new. It's taking things that have been created during the existence of humankind and putting them together and mashing them. So, like, if you asked AI what the color blurple is, it wouldn't know what to do unless someone has written a blog called "The Color Blurple is This," and it's scrubbing that and taking that information and presenting it to you in a new fashion. And so AI isn't creating anything. AI is the grocery store you go to that says, I'd like some ramen noodles. And they're like, ramen noodles, aisle 4, here you go.
Yeah. That can also, it kind of creates an existential crisis for humans as well, because, well, we know of humans creating new things. That phrase that everything is derivative is still also true, right? Because you grow up in the world, you absorb all this data and art and culture around you, you synthesize something new, and that's true, but you're using priors to do it. But then it devalues the lifestyle or the livelihood of people who make their living that way. And so I know one of the approaches being worked on right now is actually two things: AI detection, which can only give you a percentage. Like, there's a 90% chance the thing you're watching is AI generated. There's a 50% chance the thing you're watching is AI generated. But also having a kind of system, maybe blockchain, who knows, where you'll be able to verify, I made this and this was made by a human, so that you as the consumer can try to make a choice. And that's great, but that only works so far, because especially if I'm trying to make ends meet and I want chicken, right? I'd rather most pay $5 for frozen chicken versus $20 for the same amount of chicken, even though I would prefer to help that independent chicken farmer. So those laws of economics are going to screw a lot of people over, and it's scary, as people who make things, you and I. Yeah, at some point we may have to go, listen, This is the authentic JJ Meets World. And you can have a high degree of certainty that it's the authentic JJ Meets World because we videoed ourselves doing it. Here's the timestamp and the place, and it is encoded in the blockchain so that you have a high degree of certainty that you're getting something that was made by two people. And don't pay attention to Walmart's AI generated JJ Meets World over there.
Can you imagine what it must be like to be an educator right now in anything where you have to create something with original thought?
I'm glad I decided years ago I didn't want to become an educator, just for out of laziness and not wanting to deal with kids. But now for sure.
Like there's enough going on in the education world that these people are having to deal with that dumping this on them now is going to be, it's going to be next to impossible. Now, that being said, okay, so the old adage of like, you're not going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket, you got to learn this. And then we get cell phones. If you don't want to read Romeo and Juliet and you want to write a paper called like why the nurse is a bad character, you can have ChatGPT write that for you, and you are responsible for putting in something, right? You have to tell it a little bit about what you want. But if that is the future of doing some of that type of work, right? So if the future is, I need to sell this machine part for 20% above my cost to purchase it, how can I, what's the algorithm to get to that? And rather than figuring that out, you just put it into ChatGPT. Maybe the future is teaching people how to use AI in a constructive way that actually makes it a tool. That being said, fucking James Cameron right now is sitting there being like, have you guys watched T2?
Yeah.
Have you this is what you're creating this.
Well, I think of Star Trek: The Next Generation. They're on this spaceship and they interact with the computer by talking to it. Computer, calculate this. Hey, computer, what's the answer to this, right? I just thought of this the other day too. When we watch them, in just specifically Star Trek: The Next Generation, they never go to the movie theater. They never really they don't listen. The music they're listening to is a human being sitting in front of them playing classical music on a woodwind instrument or something, right? So they're in this paradigm where they could have anything they want created for them digitally by a computer, including a holographic representation of I'm on the moon right now, right? So they could computer make me a movie in the style of James Cameron or in the style of Quentin Tarantino, but use the script for Titanic, however, change these characters, this and that, and it could just do it like that. So like Gene Roddenberry actually kind of saw that, listen, so much of this work is going to get offloaded to computers. At the same time, the humans who are using it are all brilliant, right? To be the captain of the starship, you still need to understand quantum mechanics yourself. But then they're also then valuing the things that are from a time when humans didn't have that. And they thirst to see a human do it in front of them, which is kind of crazy if you think about it.
So Chat GPT joins.
It sounded like you said Chad GPT.
Oh my God. Someone make Chad GPT. Chad, could you help me with this? Excuse me, Chad.
It's a fucking douchebag. He's like, I got to lift first.
Like, bro, run a bush light.
I did when I was first playing with Chat GPT, asked it to write a play scene for me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to try to be as specific as possible. So I said, write a play scene that is a sapphic, surrealistic situation with three characters, one of whom is an anthropomorphic garbage can named Sir Dumps-A-Lot. I have I got to share it with you.
It's so good.
It was so fucking funny because then it added, because it does it kind of in threes. So the first character speaks and they're in an alleyway, and the second character speaks, and then it says Sir Dumps-A-Lot, a moving, talking garbage can with lids for eyes.
That's awesome. Okay, when ChatGPT first becomes something that is a news story, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe last February, I think, is when people really got hot about it.
So only as of the time of this recording, 4 or 5 months ago.
And it has grown in its ability to work. So we have a production department at the radio station, and their job is to take bullet points from clients and turn it into an ad. And sometimes it's an amazing ad, like the one that I did for an event coming up that they turned away because they said it was too creative. Made Tucker listen to it last time.
I loved it. It was awesome.
Great. Wouldn't that make you want to go to that event?
Absolutely.
And those are the fun ones. So I think they immediately saw, well, this is the end of us, right? Sure. Because you could give ChatGPT this and it could spit out an ad for you. They did test it. They tested it with 10 different clients with 10 different things. The problem was every single ad, it said, write a radio ad about, Tucker's Ice Cream Emporium. They have a sale coming up for 25% off. It's locally owned.
Yep.
And they don't wear pants.
Yep.
Every single ad that they put in started off with, hey. And it was HEY exclamation point, being that like ChatGPT thought that's how you get the attention of someone listening to the radio. It's going, hey. Now, since then, I think they've continued to experiment with it, like to come up with a rough draft, because it's not perfect yet. In the same way that Hey is out there, it also grabs outdated information. That's the other problem too. It's pulling information from the internet, which is not a reliable source.
Yeah, my understanding is the current Chat GPT, which is powered by GPT-4, I'm getting my terminology a little bit wrong. Its data set ends sometime in 2021. So it itself, or at least this is what OpenAI told us, is that, it's no longer, getting new data, but it's still, they're iterating on the next thing. And like, I think I can understand why a lot of people won't take it seriously yet. I remember having this conversation with an ex-girlfriend of mine when we were sitting around, and I was reading an article on AI, and I just basically said the comment like, within 5 to 10 years, AI is going to be scaring us a lot. And she was like, oh, please, Siri barely knows this or that. And I tried to make the argument of, I understand that's where it's at right now. Do you understand the rate of progress being made on it? People are not taking seriously the notion of yet, right? It's not that good yet. Mm-hmm. And the person I heard make, I think the strongest argument about this, about how we need to take it seriously, but it's so difficult to summon the emotions necessary to take it seriously, was Sam Harris in a speech he gave 6-7 years ago, maybe, at TED. And he was just realizing like the trajectory we were on with AI. And he said, right now, at that time, the rough consensus from the people working in the AI field was that general AI, meaning AI that is at human level as far as cognition or better, which on some ways it's already better, but it's still trapped in a box, right? We're about at the earliest, we're about 50 years away from that, right? And I think that's not a correct estimate. Now, I'd say, it's probably shorter than that, but let's just take that for a moment. General AI, that's 50 years away. Okay. How would you react if one day we received a message, all of the Earth at once, from an alien civilization out in space that said, people of Earth, we will arrive on your planet in 50 years. Prepare for our arrival. How would we react to that?
100%, right? So we would lose it.
We would lose our minds. Uh-huh. And it's so... It's the same situation, and that's assuming it's 50 years away. We didn't see ChatGPT being this good in 2023. So whatever estimate is out there that some form of consensus can be reached on, understand it's an estimate, and we would do well to assume that it is way off and that it's going to happen a lot sooner, barring a comet striking the Earth or a complete meltdown of human society that halts progress. It feels like to halt progress in AI, we need to lose the electrical grid.
So I'm not going to say that it's Paramount Pictures' fault, but the current Mission Impossible movie that's out, Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning Part 1, is all about AI. AI is the villain, but it's the logical villain. Right. It's the one, that says like, well, we're going to start this war, and the only thing it's afraid of is Tom Cruise shutting it down. Yeah. Like, that's the only thing it's afraid of.
Yeah. No, Tom Cruise.
Now, let me give you a metaphor that we were talking about when you're talking about how the fact that it's, essentially what AI knows at this point, and for ChatGPT, ends in 2021. So while they were making this iteration of ChatGPT, imagine a giant table in a banquet hall, and it's filled with all the foods that you can find all over the planet. and this gluttonous man with a pig nose is just and eating all these things, right? And that is it collecting all the data of the world and being able to figure it out. And then the next time he sits at that table, there's all this food from all over the world, but then there's also giant piles of its own shit that are all over the table. And to be able, excuse me, to consume what's on the table, it also has to consume its shit, which is comprised of all of the stuff that it already brought in, but has now been changed. You know, on a DNA level, it's the same, but it has been changed. The nutrients has been sucked out of it. It's been turned, it's been turned into poop. And so now it's consuming its own poop as well. So it's taking in the things that it spit out into the world, whether or not that was correct or not. Yeah. And so they said, and eventually by the 5th or 6th time it sits at the table, there is more poop than there is fresh apples for Pigman.
I think if we were to sum up this episode, the message is this: AI is going to replace a lot of things, but it's not going to replace your favorite uncle.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. That was a pretty easy episode. We should just have ChatGPT write every episode.